What destroys a man in the game of seduction isn't rejection. It's the time he wastes trying to understand the words of someone who has already decided to discard him. He clings to the speeches, the messages, the carefully constructed emotional justifications, as if there, between one comma and the next, were a secret code capable of revealing the truth. There isn't. And the more he listens, the further he moves away from what really matters. Because what a woman says is only what she wants to believe. What she does is what she truly desires. This is the truth no one wants to hear. Not because it's difficult to understand, but because it's too uncomfortable to accept. Illusion is always sweeter than reality. It's comforting to think that if you're understanding enough, empathetic enough, a good listener, an emotionally available partner, then finally you'll be chosen. But that's not love. That's a bargain. And bargains don't seduce. They accommodate, and everything that accommodates tires. Meanwhile, there are men who don't even try to understand what a woman feels, and yet they are desired, pursued, even idolized. Why? Because instead of listening, they observe. Instead of reacting, they test. Instead of trying to please, they decipher. And instead of getting lost in the stories they tell, they read the signals they can't hide. They've understood the silent rule that governs all human desire. Behavior never lies. Modern seduction has created an epidemic of emotionally obedient men and emotionally bored women. He adapts, she loses interest, he molds himself, she seeks someone else, and then when he finally rebels against this cycle, he plunges into the other extreme. Coldness, hard playing, forced indifference, thinking that being a jerk is the way out. But this too is reaction, and those who react never lead. Those who lead are those who understand. And those who understand do so not through words, but through actions. Look, she may say she wants someone who listens to her, who understands her, who values her emotions, and she's not lying. But she's also attracted to the man who disconcerts her, who throws her off balance, who disappears for 2 days without explanation and returns as if nothing had happened. Does this mean women enjoy being mistreated? No. It means their desire doesn't respond to logic, but to tension, to imbalance, to the unpredictable. It's a game of perception, not intention. Nietzsche said that what is done for love is always beyond good and evil. This phrase has been used and distorted by all sorts of emotional scoundrels. But what he meant wasn't a license to abuse. It was a revelation about the power of desire. When someone is in love, everything is justified. Every contradiction, every risk, every illogical choice. Love disarms us not because it is rational, but because it completely ignores rationality. And that's why trying to understand a woman through what she feels is like trying to fly a plane by reading another pilot's logbook. You're reading what she wants to remember, not what she experienced. You're trying to navigate with a pencil-drawn map when the terrain has already completely changed. True power comes when you put down the map and start reading the terrain. When you stop trying to feel what she feels and start seeing what she hides. You don't have to be a woman to understand what a woman wants. You need to be observant. You need to be strategic. You need to be honest enough to accept that what she says about her desires may just be a narrative, constructed to protect her image, alleviate guilt, or justify a choice she doesn't yet understand. Most people don't lie to others. They lie to themselves. And you only escape the illusion if you stop listening and start seeing. Robert Greene, in The Art of Seduction, said, "The seducer observes from the outside. He doesn't get involved in the drama, he analyzes the stage. He doesn't seek approval, he projects presence. And most importantly, he doesn't adapt to what the other person says they want. He provokes the other person to show what they truly desire." The seducer isn't an actor who pleases. He's a director who guides. And to do this, does he need to be cold? No. He needs to be lucid. He needs to see what the other person doesn't see. He needs to read the desire behind the denial, the interest behind the distraction, the surrender hidden in the resistance. When a man understands a woman's behavior, he stops being reactive. He stops chasing answers. He starts anticipating, provoking, leading. Because whoever reads the invisible controls the visible. And that's not manipulation, that's intelligence. It's strategy. It's maturity. Because in the end, what seduces isn't what you feel. It's what you understand without having to say a word. You've heard a woman say she wants a sensitive, kind man who understands her and treats her with affection. Maybe you've tried to be just that, a present, understanding, emotionally accessible man. And maybe even then, she pulled away. Got involved with someone completely opposite to what she claimed to desire. And you've been left there, trying to understand what you did wrong. But the brutal truth is, she herself doesn't know what she wants, at least not rationally. But her body has already decided long before any words are spoken. Most women live in an invisible conflict between what they've been taught to desire and what they're biologically attracted to. Part of them wants stability, security, empathy. But another part, the part that decides in the silence of chemistry, in the involuntary shiver, in the sudden acceleration of the pulse, craves intensity, challenge, uncertainty. It's not that she's lying, it's that there are two versions of her vying for control, and the version that wins is rarely the one that speaks loudest. This is where the fatal flaw of emotionally well-intentioned men lies. They believe that female desire follows logic, that if they listen enough, if they support enough, they will be rewarded with reciprocity. But seduction doesn't work that way. Seduction is visceral, not rational. It's unconscious, not verbal. Desire doesn't spring from comfort, it springs from friction, from contrast, from unpredictability. That's why the nice guy is often ignored. He offers everything, except what truly activates her instincts, emotional tension. Casanova knew this. He wasn't handsome, he wasn't rich, but he was a master at provoking contradictory emotions. He created scenarios of controlled instability, where the woman never knew if she was in control or being led. He alternated moments of surrender with subtle doses of distance. He made her feel something no rational conversation could provoke, the urge to win that man over. And the most ironic thing? Casanova listened. He listened like few others, but he didn't believe what he heard. He observed, he interpreted. It responded to the body, not to speech. Freud, even though he erred in so many areas, got one crucial point right. We are driven by unconscious impulses, repressed desires, internal forces that often conflict with what we consider morally acceptable. A woman may say she wants a decent guy, but her eyes are fixed on the man who walks into the bar with an air of someone who owes no one anything. It's not because she's inconsistent. It's because desire doesn't ask permission from consistency. And then the rational man emerges, trying to logically understand what was decided by instinct. He asks questions like, but why did she get back with that toxic ex? Why does she disappear when I show interest? Why does she say she misses me, but never takes the initiative? The answer is in the wrong place. It's not in the feeling. It's in the pattern. Women follow emotional patterns that they themselves don't perceive. But the man who understands these patterns becomes invisibly powerful. He doesn't need to force, insist, or manipulate. He simply reads the code. You notice, for example, that when she starts responding faster and using emojis, she's getting emotional. But when she starts using rational justifications for distancing herself, I'm busy, I have a lot on my mind, it's because the desire has cooled. And what does a good listener do? They try to rekindle it with dialogue. The strategist, on the other hand, creates absence, creates contrast, and with that, it reignites. Her behavior reveals everything, even when she tries to hide it. Observe how she behaves when you stop writing, when you take an extra day to respond, when you're in the room but withdraw your energy. This creates a kind of micro-tension that exposes the truth of her interest. If she reacts by trying to reconnect, there's desire. If she settles for silence, there never was. Let's dig deeper. A woman can spend weeks saying she wants something casual, that she's not ready, that she just got out of a relationship. But notice if she gets uncomfortable when you mention other options, if she asks who you've been out with, if she mentions jealousy jokingly. These are the emotional gaps the body gives up when logic tries to suppress desire. This is where the average man fails. He believes the rhetoric and backs off. The seducer sees the hidden signal and intensifies the game. Therefore, her body is her compass, not the body in the sexual sense, but the body as language. Dilated pupils, feet turned toward you, shorter breathing as you approach. Primitive signals that reveal something she hasn't yet decided to verbalize. And the more sophisticated you become in this reading, the quieter your dominance becomes. because you begin to understand without needing to ask, to act without needing to justify, to lead without needing to convince. Nietzsche once again said that happiness is the feeling that power is growing, that a resistance has been overcome. This applies perfectly to seduction, because what a woman secretly desires, even when she won't admit it, is a man who provokes in her a feeling of emotional growth, of gentle challenge, of internal self-improvement. Not the man who gives in and adapts to her script, but the man who imposes his presence, who forces her to adapt, who is unavailable but desirable. And that is magnetic. The great contradiction that almost no one dares to admit is this: the modern woman, independent and articulate, continues to be emotionally attracted to the archetype of the silent leader. The man who doesn't compete verbally but dominates behaviorally, who doesn't need to argue because he's already won in the language that really matters, her emotional reaction. He doesn't boast about knowing what she wants, he simply knows, and she feels it, not because he said it, but because he didn't need to. We then arrive at the most uncomfortable twist in this chapter. Often, she will say exactly the opposite of what she wants. She will deny, she will resist, she will rationalize, and all of this is part of the protective mechanism the female ego constructs to maintain an image of self-control. But behind this facade, there is impulse, the glance that escapes, the body that leans in, the rhythm of the conversation that changes. That's where the yes lies. No in the words, in the contradictions. And the more you try to understand her feelings, instead of deciphering the signals, the more you play the game of illusion. The further you move from the truth, and closer to the role of emotional counselor. That guy she respects but doesn't desire. Who she admires but can't imagine in bed. Who she thanks for listening to while surrendering her body to another. The game of seduction isn't won by active listening. It's won by active reading. Desire isn't revealed in conversation, it's revealed in the incoherence between what's said and what's done. And those who understand this dance with coolness and intelligence come to master it effortlessly. Because seduction in the end isn't about convincing, it's about provoking desire where the other person doesn't understand why. And this is the art that transforms any ordinary man into an unforgettable presence. She's already decided. She just doesn't know it yet. What her eyes chose, what her body responded to, what her breathing altered at your slightest gesture, all of this has already declared its intentions before her mind even had time to construct a logical explanation. And that's where the real game begins, because the woman who doesn't yet know she wants you has already started behaving as if she does. And the man who knows how to observe this silent process becomes a master not by speaking well, but by reading deeply. Most men still play the game of seduction as if they were in a courtroom, waiting for the other party's verbal confession, trying to argue their attraction, present evidence, build a case. But desire isn't confessed, it escapes. Between the lines, in lapses, in inconsistencies. And every woman, no matter how controlled, leaves traces. The problem is that you've been trained to listen, not to see. Let's start with a brutal fact. What a woman does with her time is the exact mirror of what you represent to her. She may have said she's overwhelmed with no time to think about relationships, swamped with responsibilities. But if you notice how quickly she responds to others, how she posts stories, how she shares memes, you already have the answer. What she does with her free time shows exactly who moves her emotionally. The rest is just argument. This is the first major strategic reading. Time and attention don't lie. They are the scarcest resources of modern humans. And no one invests these resources in something that doesn't produce emotional value. If she responds quickly and energetically, she's emotionally engaged. If she takes a long time, is dry or generic, even if she claims to be interested, the desire is already gone. It doesn't matter what she says. What matters is the pace, the effort, and the tone. Words without presence are just noise. Second point, hidden jealousy. The modern woman has learned not to display possessiveness. She knows it makes her appear weak or insecure, but jealousy never disappeared. It just changed form. Today, it manifests itself in micro-reactions, seemingly curious questions about who you were with, ironic comments when you disappear, passive-aggressive emojis when you mention other people. All of this is a sign of a truth that speech will never confess. She feels you are an emotional threat. And why does this matter? Because only those who fear losing something valuable feel jealous, and no one fears losing something they don't want. So even if she says she feels nothing, her reaction itself reveals the opposite. The man who understands this stops seeking declarations and starts provoking reactions. He doesn't ask if she feels, he creates situations where her feelings are revealed. This is the invisible game of high-level seduction, provoking the other to reveal what they try to hide, creating sudden absence, subtly displaying value, maintaining magnetic energy even from a distance. All of this generates emotional friction, the ingredient that separates the predictable man from the unforgettable one. When she never knows exactly how you'll react, she remains attentive. And attention is the gateway to desire. But there's an even more advanced point. A point where words completely cease to matter. Reading emotional discomfort. This requires coolness. It requires attention to the micro details. Her body language when she hears certain comments of yours. The slight change in tone when you mention another woman. The involuntary extension of the conversation when she should have already hung up. These are unconscious signals that say, something about you still throws me off balance. And this imbalance is your advantage. And here's the truth that weaklings can't bear. You don't win a woman over with logic. You win her over with disconcertion, with controlled tension, by breaking expectations. The man who maintains a straight emotional line is safe, but boring. What creates fluctuations, not in drama but in rhythm, activates her instinct as an emotional hunter. And yes, women hunt too, but they only hunt the man they see as a legitimate challenge. This is why strategic disappearance works. Not as a cheap game, but as a reading technique. When you suddenly pull away without explanation or emotional justification, and she returns to seek your presence, you have confirmation. There is a connection. When she accepts the silence without lifting a finger, the connection was yours alone. But all of this requires a rare quality, emotional neutrality. The true reader doesn't project. He observes. He doesn't delude himself. He doesn't despair. He doesn't interpret based on what he desires, but rather on what is there. He is the mirror of the situation. He reflects the naked truth. And that's why he's feared. Because women know, instinctively, when they're faced with a man who sees beyond words. A man who doesn't need her permission to understand what's going on. This, to the female ego, is disconcerting. To the instinct, it's addictive. Let's now move beyond passive reading and enter the active phase. How to provoke behaviors that reveal hidden intentions. This is where the power of social testing comes in, a technique used by the best seducers in history. It works like this. You subtly introduce elements that provoke spontaneous reactions in her. For example, casually mention that you went out with a friend. Observe her reaction. If she ignores you or abruptly changes the subject, discomfort. If she asks more, there's curiosity. If she mocks you, there's jealousy. Every reaction is a map. Every micro-expression, a revelation. You can also use silence. End a conversation at its peak. Leave a story unfinished. Cut off contact for 48 hours after an intense moment. This forces her subconscious to seek answers, to keep you active in her mind. And what remains in her mind inevitably descends to her body. Desire is repeated memory, and whoever controls the memory controls the return. Therefore, the error isn't in not being desired, it's in not being remembered. And no one remembers who was predictable, who was too easy, who said everything and showed little. We remember what made us uneasy, what interrupted something good too soon, what forced us to think when all we wanted was to forget. And that's what you become when you master reading and provoking, a memory that never closes. But perhaps the most important point of this chapter is this. It's not enough to read her behavior. You need to act on what you read. There's no point in noticing signs if you continue to treat an uninterested woman as if she were in love. Or if you ignore emotional tests because you're afraid of appearing insensitive. Real sensitivity lies in seeing what's happening and having the courage to respond firmly. That, yes, is respect. Respecting the truth she doesn't dare confess. And that, too, is power. Because the very moment you respond to behavior, not speech, you take narrative control. You position yourself as the man who isn't manipulated by emotions, but who manipulates attention with their absence. who doesn't need approval to exist, who understands that his value lies in impact, not explanation. In the end, female desire will always be more behavioral than verbal. It will always be more instinctive than logical. And the more you observe, the less you need to ask. The more you provoke, the less you need to chase. And the more you master behavior, the more you'll realize that the language of seduction isn't spoken, it's felt. Not in the heart, but in the stomach. The mistake begins when you try to feel for her. When you place yourself in the role of the man who understands, who welcomes, who translates other people's emotions as if he were an on-call therapist, believing that this will make you special. It won't. Because what attracts, what moves, what conquers, is never passive empathy. It's active impact. The presence that unbalances, the gaze that deconstructs. And that, my friend, requires coldness. It requires moving away from the illusion that just by putting yourself in her shoes, you'll be able to understand her. You won't, because even she doesn't fully understand herself. And that's precisely why you should stop trying to get inside her head and start reading the theater she's playing for her own ego. The French philosopher Michel Foucault said that people are more controlled by what they believe to be true than by the truth itself. In the game of attraction, this phrase becomes a strategic weapon. Because you begin to realize that women, like men, create internal narratives to justify behaviors that in practice follow other drivers: biology, desire, trauma, repressed impulses. And most of these narratives serve to maintain the image of emotional integrity, not to reveal what really happens. In other words, the more she talks about what she feels, the less you should listen. And the more you should observe what she does when she thinks no one is paying attention. And you, if you're smart, don't try to correct her speech. You don't debate. You don't confront. You simply accept the contradiction as a map. A map that the person herself doesn't see, but that you, by staying outside the emotional scene, can decipher with almost surgical precision. This is where true male superiority in the social game arises. Not from shouting, nor from physical domination, but from strategic lucidity. You become the one who sees the whole game, while everyone else is stuck with their pieces. This is the advantage of the outside perspective, the observer's perspective, of the man who doesn't react, he calculates, who doesn't explain himself, he imposes himself, who doesn't negotiate, he provokes. What you do from this position is not ignore her feelings. It's treating them as symptoms, not causes. It's like a doctor who listens to a cough but isn't satisfied with the sound. He wants to know what's behind it, where it hurts, what caused it, and so he heals. While the emotional man believes in the surface, the strategist goes to the root. This transforms everything. Because you stop competing with other men trying to be the most sensitive, the most empathetic, the most present. And you start operating at a higher level, the level of silent influence. You enter a conversation knowing more than she said. You schedule dates by anticipating reactions before they happen. You conduct interactions based on repeating patterns. And for that, you're remembered. Because a man who reads a woman's soul without asking permission is impossible to forget. But here an uncomfortable truth emerges, and it's time to face it mercilessly. Most men aren't ready for this power. Because this power demands solitude, not neediness. It demands emotional mastery, not anxiety disguised as attention. It demands that you not need her affection to feel worthwhile. Because if you still seek validation, any reading you do will be tainted by the desire to please. And this destroys your gaze, because the gaze that reveals is the one that doesn't need a response. This is the dilemma of the ascending man. The more he understands women, the less he needs them to understand himself. And this makes him selective, quiet, hard to impress. He doesn't pursue, he doesn't debate, he's not easily convinced. But when he decides to invest, he does so with surgical precision. Because he's seen too much. He's understood too much. He's been deceived enough to recognize every trap, every repeated pattern, every lie told with a smile and a charming gaze. And seeing all this, he doesn't become cynical. He becomes free. Reading a woman isn't about coldly deciphering her. It's about freeing yourself from the need for her to explain herself. It's watching her emotional dance and smiling internally, knowing you've seen this choreography before, and that now you choose whether to dance along or just watch from afar. True power lies in choice. And you only truly choose when you're not hungry, when you don't need a yes, when you're not trying to feel what she feels, but to see what she doesn't see. This type of man is rare, and therefore valuable. He's not afraid of silence. He uses it. He's not afraid of distance. He provokes it. He doesn't despair in the face of ambiguity. Because for a woman surrounded by predictable men, this man becomes an enigma. A mystery that can't be resolved in conversation, that can't be revealed in a confession, that can only be accessed by someone who acts sincerely and consistently. Deep down, she wants this type of man. Even if she denies it. Even if she says she wants something light, easy, without games. Because she knows that lightness becomes boring, that easy becomes uninteresting, that predictability becomes invisible, and that only the man who doesn't need her is the one she paradoxically wants to conquer. This is raw. This is real. This is human. And to become this man, you need a new paradigm, a new mental model, a new mirror. One in which you don't see yourself trying to please, but rather reading, analyzing, deciding. One where you are no longer the eternal lover who suffers for answers that never come, but the architect of your own worth, who observes the world's reaction without needing to explain yourself to it. This is how you become the one who sees first. And whoever sees first, wins first. Remember, you don't need to feel what she feels. You need to see what she doesn't want to show. You need to know what guides her, even when she denies it. You need to act according to what her behavior reveals and not what her mouth tries to soften. And if you do this consistently, coolly, with elegance, you will become a mirror no woman forgets. Because the true impact isn't in being remembered as someone nice, but as someone who saw her as she truly is. In the end, it all comes down to a blind spot. Most men spend their lives trying to be heard, understood, loved, while the real game is being played silently behind gestures, averted glances, and meaningful pauses. And those who don't learn to see the invisible become predictable. They are used, discarded, forgotten, not out of malice, but out of ignorance. You can keep playing by the rules you were taught, be nice, transparent, always present. You can keep listening to what she says while another man hears what she doesn't say. You can keep reacting to her speech, or start mastering the reading of behavior. But you need to know, in this game, those who need to understand feelings to move will always be one step behind those who understand patterns. A woman is not your enemy, but she is also not your guide. She is lost within herself, like all of us, torn between what she wants to feel and what she feels without wanting to. And it's your choice. Will you follow her through the emotional labyrinth, or will you be the one to show her the way out? Will you need her approval to act? Or will you be the reference point she seeks when all else fails? This choice requires more than ready-made phrases. It requires more than self-confidence. It requires reading, presence, structure, and above all, inner silence. Because only when you silence your desire to please do you begin to hear what the world is truly saying. It is only when you stop trying to understand others emotionally that you begin to understand yourself with brutal clarity. And on this path, you will discover that there are levels of understanding that most people don't even imagine. Ways of communicating, influencing, and dominating that don't just happen through words, they happen through behavior, perception, and invisible impact. It was precisely this code that inspired a material few would dare write. A manual without filters, without political correctness, without illusions. It is for those who no longer want to ask what went wrong. It is for those who want to see with a cool head what has always been right before their eyes. It is for those who understand that words seduce, but only up to a point. After that, what truly holds you is presence. If this is your moment to break free from the surface, you already know where to look for the next step. But only if you're ready to abandon the emotionally trained version of yourself and enter the forbidden territory of sharp perception. The choice is yours. But remember, desire doesn't wait. It responds to impact. And impact is always caused by the one who sees first.